Welcome to the Peak Revival podcast. My name is Vesna. Today, we're having a special episode where it's behind the scenes of me and my work, and I'm being interviewed by my lovely co-host, Melissa, who is on my team, who is the head coach on my team. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very interested to get to know you a little bit better, and I'm sure all of your listeners are as well.
Dig deep for the questions. All right.
All of these questions have been drawn from your active BBB community at the moment. So as you mentioned, I do run the Bye Bye Burnout program. I am the head coach there, and I've reached out to all our lovely participants and all our lovely clients, and then we've put together a list of questions for you that we are all very curious to know. So let's jump in.
Fire away.
Let's jump in. I think first and foremost, people want to know, how did you get here? You have obviously a naturopathic background. All of your work was created from this experience. What did those clinic days look like, and how did you get here?
Clinic days were very busy. So I was in clinic for about 10 years and I loved it. Like, I was the person who went straight into clinic after she graduated, right? I was one of the very few, and it was nerve-wracking, but I loved it. And I remember at one point, for a very brief moment, I went working for another company, actually called Nature Sunshine Company, if you've ever seen their supplements. And I worked with them, and I wasn't in the clinic, so it was a full-time job. And I think I lasted about 3 months, and I was like, I can't do this. I just love to be in clinic, right? And so I quit. They were really unhappy with me. And then I went back to my sweet spot, which was being in the clinic. So I loved working with people. I loved helping people. I loved this work. Growing up, you know, we went to see the naturopath and the homeopath. We didn't go to see the GP much at all. My mum cooked everything. Everything was organic and nutrition. And so that was a big part of my upbringing. And so when I was about 13, 14, I was like, you know, in school, people were like, what do you want to do when you finish? I said, I want to be a naturopath. And people were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. People were already like, that makes sense, right? And so from a young age, I knew what I wanted to do, loved being in clinic. And then, you know, clinic also has a lot of challenges as well, because you're very busy. Well, I was anyway. It was like back to back, 6 days a week. And there's, you know, a business to run as well. So it's not just the naturopathic side. There is the business side as well, which I think that when you graduate, you don't know the business side. You're just well trained to be a naturopath. You do so many clinic hours and you're just immersed in this stuff, but not the business side of things. And I didn't love the business side of things. I liked it, but I didn't love it. And as a business, you know, the clinic was very busy. And I just got to this point one day where I was, you know, it consumed a lot of my life, right? I was, you know, thinking about work. I was thinking about my patients, on after work and time off. And I always looked stressed, right? And obviously I'd hit burnout. And I remember having this moment in the clinic one day. I was standing in my dispensary. I was in between patients, and I just stood there, and there was all this, you know, people from the next door shop were coming in talking, and the other guy that the acupuncturist that I was working with, he was talking. I was just had this moment, you know, it was like a flash. And I went, 5 years from now, my life is going to be exactly the same. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I actually can't do this anymore. Even though I loved it, but I just couldn't do it. I knew I just couldn't do it anymore. And it was in that moment that I went, you know what? I am going to leave the practice. And everyone, like, I have to say, everyone was against me on that decision. Like, everyone close to me was like, you're crazy. Like, this is such a great practice, you know, such a great business. And I was like, yeah, but I just want to do things differently. I wanted a break first, and then I wanted to do things differently and bigger. And so when I finished up in practice, I remember it being a really hard to leave, right? Because, you know, I had so many patients, right? Over the years, I had built up such a relationship with my clients that people were crying. Like, I was crying, people were crying. It was really hard. Anyway, it was a hard moment. And I remember when I had a break, and I was like, I don't think I'll ever go back to business. I was like, I don't want to do business anymore. It's too hard. It's consuming, right? But I didn't know then what I know now. Like, I don't find it like that now. I definitely, if I knew then what I know now, I may still be in practice, but I do much prefer what I'm doing now. But if I understood, like the things that I understand now, it would have been an easier process for me, or an easier journey to run the clinic and the business, being as busy as it was. And so the days in clinic, we're busy, lots of clinical experience, you know, seeing lots of different things and helping people in all sorts of ways. And the way I specialized in burnout was I went through burnout. And the other thing that I saw in my practice was everyone had some element of stress that was really holding them back. And at the time, I didn't know how to help them. Like, I would sit there and I'd ask them, what else is going on? Like, and they'd be like, oh, just family, my children, my partner, my, finances, my health, like whatever it is. And I would just listen. And that was the best I could do then, because I couldn't coach them. I couldn't really help them in that way. So I thought, but listening was a lot. It was really transformative for them because no one was listening. Like, they weren't talking about it.
We see that a lot on the calls too, where, we host the weekly coaching calls with the Bye Bye Burnout program, where women are able to come and discuss what's going on in their lives and get a little bit more in-depth and personalized support. And on these calls, a lot of the times it is just wanting that space to be heard, wanting somebody to listen and somebody to put intention and care into what's going on in their lives, because sometimes you don't have these outlets. Not everybody has these outlets to be able to just talk. Today, I felt bloated and I felt tired and I felt, right? Like, just having that space to let it go is really powerful.
It is really powerful. That's, it's definitely what I've seen in my work. Like, I think, now we talk to ChatGPT or whatever, like it's not the same.
No.
Because there's something about that relationship, with the practitioner and with your patient that does a lot of the healing work. Like, actually, they proved this scientifically. Like, I went very much into the placebo effect and understanding why some people get better and some people don't, because that's something that I saw in my clinic. Some people were doing all the right things and they weren't getting better. And it's just like, that is really weird, right? And when I understood more about, the placebo effect, how the mind influences the body to heal, and that all comes down to the nervous system. And then they did a piece of research where one of the scientists or professors, he basically told his patients in this study that they were receiving a placebo. Like, it wasn't hidden. He was just like, I want to see what happens here. I'm going to tell them, here is your vial of medicine, but it's placebo. They're just sugar pills. And what he found is that his patients still got better. And what he put it down to was the relationship between the practitioner and the patient. So that being heard, that being held, that having that space, was actually just as medicinal as anything you're going to put in as a supplement or medicine, right? And, that's something that we've recreated online because, yes, that one-on-one relationship is really powerful. But I noticed when I started Bye Bye Burnout online, actually the group is even more powerful, which I didn't think was something that was ever going to be like that. I never thought, I really did think that you needed the one-on-one. Like, I was convinced. And then when I took it online and I saw the transformations, like you see it all the time in the group, the changes that people, it's like, it's incredible, right?
The community is it's really important in this healing space, because so often, especially with online programs, people are managing these things on their own and they feel like they're alone. And when you feel like you're alone in your healing process, you feel like you can never get better because there must be something wrong with me, right? This is only happening to me and I'm the special case and something will go wrong because I have this, and this. And then you get into a community and you're like, whoa, you have that too? Like, you feel that way too? And then it gives this spark of hope of, wow, like, I'm not alone in this. And it is possible to feel seen and feel heard and be supported and create new pathways for healing that rely on connection and relation and supporting each other. And that really is what the benefit of those calls is, and of that space is, that community space. So yeah, I see it all the time, that face-to-face, and the importance of community. But I'm curious for you, now that you are outside of that space, now that you are now running these programs online, do you miss being in practice?
I don't miss being in clinical practice, like, back-to-back appointments. And I still obviously have private clients. But I do like doing things in a bigger space. I do love doing group calls. Like, I have to say, like, the bigger group stuff is really kind of where my jam is right now. That is really satisfying for me. And there's something about holding that space as well, which I find, like, when you have women on the call, like, everyone's holding that space together. And if you don't know what I mean, like, it's kind of hard to describe what that means, holding the space, but there's some kind of energetic shift that happens on those calls where kind of everyone is contributing in some way, and it's like, yeah, you don't feel alone, or you all feel kind of in the same boat. And there's something hopeful about that because you're all on this journey together. And there's so much to that a one-on-one interaction is not going to give you. And the other thing is with the online space is that you guys are in the group every day, right? And so they're getting responses every day. You don't have to wait to see me in 2 weeks' time to get your question answered, right? You're getting answers daily. So that makes a huge difference, because if you have a question or a concern or a doubt and you're not sure, like, that is going to stop you from doing or moving forward. I do love the online space. I love the group work. And that's something like for 2026, you know, if you heard my podcast at the end of 2025, I really talked about how, you know, I want to build, you know, Esther Perel, you know, that relationship coach, she was talking about building your village or your tribe. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want to do for my personal life, build the village. But I also want to do that in my business. And that to me looks like doing more in-person stuff, like doing retreats, doing bigger group stuff. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. That's beautiful. What did you find was missing in the wellness space that made you feel compelled to create the Bye Bye Burnout program?
Yeah, so it was definitely, I went through a lot of iterations because it was my own journey. So the nutrition and the supplements, all very important. But as I mentioned, I was going through the, you know, the placebo effect. What are the other ways that people get better without any treatment? And so I really explored that area for many years. And the work that I was doing with my clients was, forget about supplements and, you know, herbs. We're just going to focus on mindset and your stress and your bad relationships and habits and, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? And I thought this is it. This is the key difference, right? But actually the results were really lackluster. Oh. They weren't that good. And I was like, this is really interesting. Okay, so, and then I combined them. I went to the extreme of it's all this and then it's all this, and then combining them was where the magic really happened. That's where the biggest results, the fastest results, the results that we see in the community, it's like, wow, that's where that happened. So really understanding, yes, physiologically, you know, changing our nutrition and changing our biochemistry and reducing our stress, but also going beyond the body, like in a sense of let's go further upstream, like what's going on in the mind? What's going on in your life? Like that's something that we really don't explore. We explore it in a sense of got to get over it, got to get tougher, got to push through, got to overcome my behaviors. You know, that's not really understanding it, right? That's just kind of trying to put some more pressure on yourself. But really understanding how the mind works and how we operate and where our life is at and where do we really need to kind of step back and see where are the deficiencies and where's the excess in our life? Where are the gaps? And spending a bit of time there. So really looking at the, you know, the body, the nutrition, but also the mind and the spirit of the person. You know, it's not just about the physiological stuff. It's also, you know, you as a spirit, as a person, are you having your spiritual needs met?
You mentioned this kind of all or nothing mindset. And this is something that I see a lot in the program with the women who are moving through the program. And when they feel as though they can't do everything perfectly, they abandon it completely. I think we all have this perfectionist mindset. You speak about it on your podcast. You speak about it in the program. If you couldn't do something perfectly, would you completely abandon it? And how does this mindset of perfection actually drive burnout rather than creating a pathway for success?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like I remember years ago, I was on a podcast and it's something like freedom wellness or something. And I thought, yes, that's what it's about. Wellness and health should be about freedom, not about like this perfectionist routine that makes you feel anxious or that if you're not doing it 100% correctly, then you're failing. Like health should be about freedom. It shouldn't be about, you know, being so all or nothing, right? All or nothing. I don't do all or nothing in my life. I look at that as just a way that we sabotage ourselves from getting the results that we want. That's actually really a sabotage habit. So when people come into the program, and even with my private clients, I'm like, what? Because people say to me, oh, if I can't do all of these things, it's not even worth it, is it? I'm like, even if you did just one thing, just one, and you did that consistently, you would get results. Like you would see a massive shift in, say, 6 weeks, right? You just did one thing. So this idea that we need to do everything in the perfect order, in the perfect way, you're just not going to have a perfect week, 6 weeks, 3 months. It doesn't exist, right? And so as long as you can be consistent, and, you know, even with the Bye Bye Burnout program, we look at like 80%, like no one sticks to it 100%. If they stick to it 80%, that's where the results are, right? That's pretty much what the people who are going gangbusters, they're doing about 80% of it, you know? They're having some bad days, they're falling off the wagon, but they're getting straight back on because they have nothing on it, because they don't have the all or nothing attitude. That attitude, it derails people, and then they're like, oh, I can't stick to this. This is just another thing I can't stick to. You know, I'm going to try something else. And then they just keep repeating the same pattern. So all or nothing I don't do. I like to add things into my life bit by bit. Mm-hmm. And that's why the program's delivered like that, right? Mm-hmm. It's delivered exactly how I like to do things, is like bit by bit, and you're stacking habits, so it feels not overwhelming. It feels almost effortless, and there's no pressure behind it.
So I think people really want to know, because coming back to this all or nothing mindset, the perfectionist mindset, obviously you will have bad days. It is normal to have bad days. It's normal to just have those days where it's not happening. You know, things aren't working properly. And if one little thing goes wrong, it just blows up. You talk about this a lot in regards to bandwidth, but I think people are really curious and want to know, what does a bad day look like for you? How throughout this process and all of the learning that you've developed, how have your thoughts changed on those days? So what was it like? Maybe what did a bad day look like before versus now?
Well, definitely before it was different. So if I had a bad day before, I would be the person who would catastrophize about problems. Like something happened in the business, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. This is so bad. I would be stressing about it. I'd be thinking about it. I'd be talking to someone about it. Like, this is so bad, so bad. So I would really catastrophize problems. And then my bad day was all day. That's in terms of something happening in my day, but I could still have a bad day food-wise, you know, where you have a complete blowout. And I think the difference today compared to back then, because, you know, I speak to people, I have friends who are really rigid with their diet. And, you know, we do Christmas lunches and things like that. And you'll see me, I'll eat gluten, I'll have a glass of wine, I'll do the things that even though I don't do the majority of the time, I would do them at those times because I'm not rigid. I used to be rigid. And it was really unhealthy for me. I had so many food issues. I had so much food anxiety that everything I ate reacted in my gut. And I just, you know, I remember my mum saying to me at one point years ago, she goes, it's like you curse your food. Mm. And I was like, yeah, because I can't eat that. I can't eat that. This is bad. That's bad. And this is bad for this reason and that reason. It was just like, oh my gosh. And so when I see people like that, like I will never slip back into that pattern because I don't think that's healthy. I think we are more resilient than every single morsel of food is going to bring us down. Like, you know, I talked about, this was really funny on that episode of the Diary of a CEO. We were talking about this last weekend, me and some friends, how Stephen, what's his name, Bartlett, he said that he had 2 glasses of wine and then that night he didn't sleep properly. And then the next day it threw him out all day with his workload and his podcasting. And then actually for the next 3 days, he said it took him 3 days to get back into his normal routine from 2 glasses of wine.
Yeah.
And someone in the comments below said, wow, how soft do you have to be? And I thought that was hilarious because that's what I like. That's my personal opinion too. Like, I don't want to be so optimized that I can't handle 2 glasses of wine and then my half my week is thrown out. Like that doesn't seem optimized to me. I'm not ever that rigid, right? Where there's these really hard rules and it's very distressing. It's very hard to keep to them and it can suck the joy out of life, right? You go to nice events with people and there's nice food and you're like, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't eat this. You know, look, healing during the healing phase, obviously we talk about in the program, that's important. That's 100% important. But that's, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks out of your life. And maybe if it's longer too, that's okay as well. But, you know, I think overall, like you want to enjoy life. You want to have freedom. You want to have freedom with food. That's really important. And so my bad days now, the other day, I think when we were talking about prepping this podcast, I was like, yeah, well, I didn't have breakfast until like lunchtime. Like I broke my own rules, because it was such a busy morning. I had appointments and I had meetings, and it was like from 6 a.m. it was back to back. But I was okay because I'm not burnt out anymore, right? When I don't stick to a routine, I don't carry as much. There's not as much weight on that, right? I'm not like, oh, I've broken it. It's a bad day. This is really bad. Like I've ruined my whole week. Now I've got to start back again. And that's the stuff that I hear that a lot of people do. So I'm just straight back on the next meal, straight back on, back into my habits. And a bad day to me is not the catastrophe that it was before. So the days that I have low bandwidth, I just know that I have low bandwidth. And I'm just like, you know what? You have no bandwidth. You're not going to get this done right now. You need to just take a break for 5 minutes or do something else until your mind creates more bandwidth. And then you can come back to it. And that has served me very well. That's allowed me to do a lot more work, get a lot more done, be very productive without feeling that catastrophe at all, but also without that overwhelm and stress.
And so speaking of low bandwidth, you talked a lot about what they are and how you can handle them, but how can women tell the difference between laziness and low nervous system capacity?
Laziness is just not ever normally laziness because there is still a metabolic process that's happening there. So either they don't have the energy, right, or they're in that kind of freeze response, right, that they can't actually do another thing. They have zero capacity. So one of the things that I see with women who are burnt out, who have mitochondrial dysfunction, they just don't have that energy production. And so it looks like laziness, but really they just don't have that energy. The body is conserving their energy, whatever it has, for metabolic processes. There's not enough overflow to do things that they need to do. Because really think something like exercise, right? Our desire to exercise is a natural desire due to a surplus of energy. It's not as if we have to go, okay, now I've got to go to the gym. I'm so tired. I can't be bothered. I'm so lazy, whatever. No, actually there isn't a surplus of energy there. So therefore you're using your willpower to push you through. And in terms of the nervous system, quite often people stuck in that freeze response won't be able to do more. They won't recognize why, but they just have such a small capacity to take anything new on. And so everything feels like it's just too hard. It's just too much. I can't. Like the brain just goes no, right? So laziness, unless, even teenagers, that's about the only example I would give for laziness. But still, they're going through a massive growth spurt. So that's why their energy is being used to grow. And that's why it looks like laziness. So very rarely just laziness. There's a lot more going on internally.
Yeah, because again, I see this a lot in the calls and in the community where people feel like on those days where they have low bandwidth, if they stop, that internal dialogue that they have with themselves is, I'm lazy, I'm not good enough. What would you say to these women when they're having these thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I have to continually keep doing and keep moving and keep going and pushing through in order to feel enough and to feel like you've had a good, successful day, that you feel worthy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like that's more of a habitual pattern. So, if you don't have a productive day, how does that make you less good enough? If your output determines whether you're good enough, then yeah, you're going to have days where your sense of self-esteem is going to fluctuate because you're basing it on external output, which is not the case, right? We are good enough. We should, that's just not being able to tap into that self-esteem or that confidence because the mind is telling us other things, right? Oh, you did that really badly. I can't believe you said that. That's so embarrassing. Like that's just the mind, right? But, when the mind quietens down, you don't feel like you're not good enough, right? You don't even think about it. It's not even something that comes up, but it's only when we're being super hypercritical because our mind takes over that we start to then go, well, if I do more, then I'm enough. That's a losing battle, tying your self-esteem to your output. And I think that's a really hard one. I've done podcasts on that because I've definitely seen that for myself that, if I'm achieving, then I'm enough. But that's a trap because the goalpost is always moving. And I think as soon as you can get awareness and disconnect from output and productivity and achievement and just know that that sense of enoughness is something that is a feeling that you're connected to when you don't have a lot of crap going on in your head. When you're more centered, when you're more quiet, that's a natural feeling.
What are some of the unspoken things that you've learned from helping over 10,000 women throughout the program?
Yeah, so I guess some of the things that we haven't spoken about is, I talk about in the program the rescuer profile, the rescuer mindset. And again, I'm bringing a lot of my case studies into this because, that's something I discovered for myself. So a rescuer is someone who is always rescuing people in a sense of overcommitting to things, helping everyone, leaving themselves last, and then they can become resentful. And so it takes up a lot of your time and your space and your bandwidth and your energy. So I'll give you an example that, in my work, I have had moments and a lot of moments that I'm like, I just want to make it as easy as possible for them to do. So easy. And then if they don't find it easy, well, then that's on me. I need to make it easier. Like I need to make it break down easier, make it more clear, whatever, right? And I got to that point where I realized the fact that they, if someone's struggling with something, then that's not, it's not on me that I haven't made it easy enough for them, right? In fact, a rescuer turns people into victims. And that's the biggest lesson I learned, is that as I'm trying to make it and do it all for them and make it as easy as possible, then I'm saying to myself that they don't have the resources or the ability to do it on their own without me. And so therefore I've created a victim. And then what happens is a victim will, turn against you, right? And so, we'll say to mothers in the group, like, you're doing everything for your kids and no one appreciates it. You feel resentful, but the kids become like the victim and then they become the aggressor. Like they don't appreciate anything. They fight back with you. And it's like, while the rescuer role is very nurturing and very helpful, like without rescuers, I don't think we'd have nurses and doctors and all of that, right? People who really want to make a difference. So I don't think it's all bad, but I think there needs to be awareness of how much are you being a rescuer in your relationships, in your work, and just in your day-to-day, because that is extremely draining and just takes a lot from you, and it doesn't serve others either. I think that's, the big lesson that I learned. It doesn't really serve people. And so that's, probably one of the, things that we talk about early on in the program that we haven't mentioned here on the podcast. The other final thing that I would mention is hypervigilance. So, we see people in the program that have been exhausted chronically, that have had chronic gut symptoms, chronic thyroid conditions, autoimmune, just chronic symptoms, right, from whatever cause. And one of the things that I've noticed in my work, which makes a huge difference, is to recognize how much the hypervigilance, which I'll explain, but how much the hypervigilance is contributing to the symptoms and really exacerbating them, if not being the block to healing, right? And so hypervigilance means that, I'll give you an example. So when someone's tired, they've been chronic fatigue for years, and so their energy goes up and down. And so when it's down, they're like, oh, why am I so tired? I'm so sick of being tired. I've done everything. What am I not doing right? What did I eat yesterday? Did I take all my supplements? Or why am I still like this? I can't stand being like, I do all the right things. It's so frustrating. Like that mental conversation, or it's like, I can't do this because I won't have the energy, or I can't eat that because, that's going to affect my health. So that's hypervigilance, and that keeps the stress response active all day. It causes that slow drip of cortisol all day long, which then has its downstream effect, right? It starts to hijack other systems of the body, changes our hormones, changes our biochemistry, creates inflammation, breaks down our gut, breaks down liver detox pathways. Like so much is happening. That then makes sure that the symptoms stay. And so a lot of people, when I have that conversation with them, they don't realize that, yeah, that's what I do. I really do that. And it's like going to war with your body. Like they don't realize it, but that hypervigilance is like you're in resistance. Yeah. So that's probably, along with all the, the dietary and the mindset, but those are the other two things that I think that are really important, that when women come through the program, that they see that.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Melissa, for your interview style.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Vesna. And I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure anybody listening also learned a lot. And
amazing.
Thank you so much. you.